we've seen a step in the right direction today. First, let's just look at the raw numbers and then we can do some comparisons. This is the Australian 15 plus population vaccination rate. It's a few days old because I want to compare compare the Indigenous weekly updates with the Australia-wide updates. So this is not today's number, it's a couple of days old, but 89% first dose, 83% double dose. That's the national average. And if I show you the Indigenous vaccination rate, well, both doses, 59.1%. So you can see that gap between the Indigenous First Nations vaccination rate and the Australian national population, it's about 24 percentage points still. Where is the gap bigger and smaller just on a state-by-state basis? First of all, this gap has been, and very big in Western Australia. This is how big the second dose gap's been since early September. In WA, 34 percentage points, just about more than 25 percentage points in SA, about 23.5 in Queensland, smaller in Tasmania, 11% in the Northern Territory, and then less than 10% in the other states and territories. So this is still a very big gap. It's still a very big challenge, especially as states tick toward opening up and allowing this virus in. The reason I'm saying, though, it's a step in the right direction is if we look at the national picture and look at the dose 1 gap versus the dose 2 gap, well, the dose 1 gap has actually started to drop in the last couple of weeks. It's now down to 18.8% each points between Indigenous Australians and the national average. And so that means we know second doses follow first doses within a few weeks. Hopefully that double vax rate will be down to about 18 or 19% as well, and hopefully as the weeks go on that gap will continue to fall. So it's stepping in the right direction, but that is not to say at all that the gap does not exist. It is still there and it's still massive.
Casey, which particular areas are of the most concern right now?
Yeah, let me show you a list of the regions on a finer detailed level and the gap. This is the gap on first doses. Again, we'll look at the first doses because we know second doses follow first doses. We saw WA was a big problem. Mandurah remains the region of the country with the biggest gap, 37.6 percentage points between the first dose rate of the region as a whole and First Nations people living there. 33% in most of Perth. Cairns still very high. That includes Yarrabah, the Indigenous community of Yarrabah, 32 percentage points there. Have been seeing some improvement there, but it is still a very high number. And they are, they remain the big issues. Regional Queensland, regional WA and parts of Perth all making up. But still also parts of Adelaide, 26 percentage points. The northern suburbs, well, a lot of Adelaide seeing some very big numbers. And as you go down, you're seeing much more of regional Queensland as well. But the biggest ones remain Perth, Mandurah and northern Queensland.
Nearly 40% gap there. That's why we're seeing new initiatives to try to close that gap, to roll out vaccinations quicker in Indigenous communities. Just briefly while we've got you, Casey, the clock is ticking to border openings in several states. How quickly is the vaccination pace picking up?
Yeah, we're seeing it, some sort of interesting changes in the speed of things, particularly as we see cases and outbreaks and as rules and mandates start to get announced as well. What I'll show you is the pace at which first doses among the 16 plus population are being done in each state and territory. So there's quite a lot of lines here, one for each state and territory. We saw a couple of weeks ago, the Northern Territory saw a real spike in first dose numbers, people coming forward at, getting close to 4% or more people in a single week. It's now looking at about 3% of people have had their first dose in the past week, and they've just been actually overtaken. Queensland now, 3.1% of people have had their first dose in the past week. So that has surged just in the last week or so, partly because we've seen cases on the Gold Coast. We know that's been a motivator for people to go and get the jab before. We've also seen some rules announced by the Queensland Government, one of those being, well, a vaccine requirements for people to visit pubs and clubs and places like that when the borders open in mid-December. So it's a pretty big incentive if you like going to pubs to go and get, you've just been putting off getting the jab. It's a pretty good incentive to go and do it. So that's they're the two states and territories that have seen the most movement at the moment. We haven't really seen movement in Western Australia, where we do have sort of a plan has been announced to announce a date for those borders to open. Maybe they actually need the date in place to see the real movement, because we haven't seen much of a change in trajectory there.